So, guys, coming into this offseason, there were plenty of questions surrounding George Pickens. After his strong first season in Dallas, many wondered if he could build on that success, stay focused despite the contract talk, and prove he was truly the game-changing weapon this offense needed. In fact, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones both made it clear they wanted George Pickens to prove himself before committing to him long-term, and now just 3 days into his second year's training camp, that conversation is already starting to change. George Pickens has been turning heads with his performances, and that's not all. Day 3 also brought several standout performances on defense, plus a new roster move by Dallas. So, stick with me. I'm going to break down everything that happened on Day 3 of Cowboys training camp and why George Pickens is proving the whole NFL wrong. What's up, Cowboys Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, before we get into all the good stuff, let's talk about something the front office did yesterday, because it's honestly a pretty telling move. The Cowboys made a couple of roster changes. They waived with an injury designation linebacker Charles Snowden. Now, that basically ends his short stay with Dallas. And look, he was already facing a 3-game suspension, which, from what I understand, still stands even after this move. When a guy gets waived with an injury designation, he typically reverts to injured reserve first. So honestly, I would not be shocked if this eventually turns into a full release down the road. Not the most shocking news of the day, but it's worth mentioning because roster churn like this tells you a lot about who the coaching staff is comfortable moving on from this early in camp. Now on the flip side, the team also signed offensive tackle Sebastian Gutierrez, mostly played right tackle in his career, but he's got some experience at left tackle and guard too. So he gives Dallas a little extra depth up front. Honestly, I think this move says the coaches want more bodies to compete, especially with some of these younger tackles still trying to prove themselves. He's got a steep road to actually making the 53-man roster. Now, when you look at how this offensive line is shaping up right now, adding depth like this makes total sense. The coaching staff has already said they want real competition at some of these spots along the line, and I respect that. They're not just handing jobs out because of a draft pick or a name. They want guys to earn it in practice, rotating different combinations and seeing who actually holds up. That's exactly the mindset you want heading into a season where the expectations are as high as they are for this team. Alright, so that's the roster stuff out of the way. Now let's get into the fun part, because Day 3 really was George Pickens' show. I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I went into this camp wondering the same thing a lot of you were probably wondering. Can George Pickens be that guy again? Can he stay locked in with all the contract noise swirling around him? Well, 3 days in, and I think we already have our answer. I'm talking about catches that make you stop scrolling and rewind the clip like 3 times just to make sure you saw it right. His concentration and his hand-eye coordination out there have honestly looked next level. Guys are getting left on the ground trying to cover him. I watched one route where he just made the defensive back look completely lost, like the guy had no idea which way Pickens was even going. And that's the thing about Pickens. When he's locked in like this, he's just effortless. The ball looks like it's being delivered right into a pillow every single time. If this is what training camp Pickens looks like, I don't know how opposing corners are going to handle him once the pads really start cracking in these joint practices. And look, this matters for more than just highlight reels. Remember, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones basically told him to go prove it this offseason before they hand him a long-term deal. Well, based on what we're seeing through 3 days, he's doing exactly that. If he keeps this up, this contract conversation is going to look a whole lot different by the time the season actually starts. And it's not just the flashy catches either. What really stood out to me is how consistent he's been. It's easy to make 1 or 2 highlight plays and have everybody talking about you for a day. It's a whole different thing to show up on Day 1, Day 2, and Day 3 and keep stacking good rep after good rep. That kind of consistency is exactly what turns a talented receiver into a guy quarterbacks trust in the biggest moments. And speaking of trust, Dak Prescott has looked really sharp finding his guys through these first few days too. He's been on the money on a lot of these throws, and you could tell Pickens is starting to become one of his favorite targets to go to when he needs a play. And Ryan Flournoy also flashed a little bit, showing he might be able to give this offense a legit third option through the air if he keeps developing, but make no mistake. Right now, this is Pickens' camp to run away with. Okay, now let's shift over to the defensive side of the ball because there was just as much to talk about over there. Let's start with Quinnen Williams. This man has been an absolute problem in the trenches. Even without pads, he was getting home on what would have easily been sacks in a real game. I watched him get double-teamed on back-to-back plays and still find a way to work through it and get into the backfield. That's the kind of thing that gets you excited, especially considering this is a guy heading into his second full season with Dallas. If he's causing this much chaos in camp, I think we're in for a big year from him up front. Then you've got Caleb Downs, who honestly might be my favorite storyline of the entire camp so far. This guy lined up on CeeDee Lamb in coverage, and I mean, that's about as tough a test as you can get for a young defensive back, and Downs more than held his own. He was getting physical, riding him on his inside shoulder, just refusing to give an inch. At one point, he basically threw Lamb to the ground after the play, which I love that competitiveness. Now look, Lamb is going to have his moments too. He's one of the best receivers in the league for a reason, and he had a couple of really nice catches later in the session, including one where he just made it look easy against solid coverage. But the fact that a young corner is out there matching him play for play like that, that's a really encouraging sign for this secondary heading into the year. What I really like about Downs is that he's not backing down from anybody, even in walkthrough type reps where guys are usually just going through the motions. He's playing every single snap like it's a real game, and that kind of mentality tends to rub off on the rest of the room. If he can keep bringing that same energy once the pads come on and things get live, I think he's going to push hard for real playing time early in his career. We also got our first real look at rookie linebacker Jaishawn Barham, and from what I'm hearing, the front office is already buzzing about him. Jerry Jones himself was out there calling him a war daddy, which, I'll be honest, that's a nickname that's going to take me a minute to get used to. But if the owner is throwing that kind of praise around after just a couple days, you know something's clicking. I saw a rep where Barham read the play perfectly and would have absolutely stopped the run cold if this were live contact. He's got that instinct that you just can't teach, and it looks like he's got it early. And it's not just Jerry Jones either. From what's being said around the building, the coaching staff has taken notice too. When multiple voices in the organization are all saying the same thing about a rookie this early, that's usually a pretty good sign. He's the real deal. And then, of course, we can't skip over the first turnover of camp. Malik Hooker picked off a tipped pass that came off the hands of Jaden Blue. Now, I'll be honest, Blue is supposed to have some pretty reliable hands, so that one's on him a little bit. He had a chance to just secure that ball, and instead it popped right up into the air for Hooker to scoop up. But credit to Hooker for being in the right spot and finishing the play. That's what veteran safeties are supposed to do, be around the football and capitalize when the opportunity presents itself. First interception of camp always gets the defense fired up, and you could tell the energy shifted after that one. Guys were flying around a little faster, chirping a little more. That competitive juice was flowing. One more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up, and it's not really a highlight play, but I think it says a lot about where this defense is headed. After practice wrapped, I saw Christian Parker out there putting in extra work with Caleb Downs, just the two of them going over technique. And listen, this guy has a track record of developing really good defensive backs everywhere he's coached, so seeing him put in that kind of individual time with a young player this early in camp, that's exactly the kind of stuff that turns a good secondary into a great one by the time the regular season rolls around. It's the little things like that, the extra film, the extra reps after everyone else has already headed to the locker room, that end up making the biggest difference once the games actually start counting. I also want to point out, this whole defense has just looked more physical through 3 days than I really expected this early in camp. Guys are flying to the ball, there's a lot of energy out there, and even without pads on, you can tell there's a different mentality this year. That's a credit to the coaching staff for setting the tone early and getting buy-in from the whole locker room. So when you put it all together, roster moves up front, giving the offensive line some extra competition. George Pickens looking like a completely different level receiver. And this defense flashing playmakers all over the field, from Quinnen Williams to Caleb Downs to Jaishawn Barham to Malik Hooker day 3, gave us a whole lot to be excited about. And honestly, I think the biggest takeaway here is George Pickens. Coming into camp, people were questioning whether he could handle the pressure and the contract talk. 3 days in, he's already answering those questions the only way that really matters, out on the field. If he keeps this pace up once the Cowboys start hitting Rams for those joint practices, I think a lot of people around the league are going to have to eat their words. All right, Cowboys Nation, that's going to do it for today's breakdown. Let me know down in the comments what stood out to you most from day 3, whether it was Pickens taking over on offense, Quinnen Williams wrecking things up front, or the defense flashing early with guys like Barham and Hooker. There's still a long way to go before the regular season, but if this is any indication of where this team is headed, it should be a fun camp to follow. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our camp coverage as it keeps rolling in.